You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet?
Welcome back, Pithy listeners. I'm Erica.
And I'm Caroline.
And today we are bringing you all of the Thanksgiving dinner with a big old helping of truth on the side.
Yes. It's a discussion-based format. We're trying something new, in part because we want to rip off of each other and what this holiday means historically.
Because today we really just want to have a discussion about Thanksgiving's historic origins, but also
we're going to focus on the story of one woman in particular, Sacagawea. We did an episode about her for our children's series, Once Upon a History, and we loved what we were able to present, and we presented it truthfully and honestly, but with a children's lens.
Not everything in Sacagawea's story is safe or proper to discuss with children at the age that we were targeting.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are going to tell you as full of a story as we can get it today. And with that, we're going to release our Once Upon a History episode on Sacagawea so you can have a background to discuss what your kids are hearing on the story. And we're also going to put out some fun worksheets. So if you want to have an educational treat at Thanksgiving, or if you have lots of kids at the kids' table who want to color, we are here to provide. It's our Thanksgiving gift to you.
What we'd like to do with her story is to try to give her agency, which is very difficult to do when you have a historical person who had no voice of their own that was recorded for history. All
Absolutely.
we can hear from her is what Lewis and Clark wrote in their journals and a couple of other random accounts of her or of her life, but so much of it is lost, and her image is used so often to represent other people's opinions, thoughts, crusades, that we want to try to give her agency to the extent that we can. And we really want this to be a great way for you to introduce the notion of what it meant to be an Indigenous person in the United States during this very turbulent time. And we thought Indigenous Peoples Month, the month of Thanksgiving, and the pretty historically inaccurate stories that we grew up with, this was a great time to reintroduce that and to allow you to connect back with your family, back with your children, to have an interesting discussion about it
that's fact-based.
Fact-based and fun.
And not only that, if you want to go the very, very vapid route, you can outsmart all of your family members with all of your fun facts at Thanksgiving dinner now.
Oh, I do enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
That is a goal. Yes, I like that.
So, if you're going to go the vapid route, there you go.
All right, without further ado, let's chat.
I love it. We had a discussion before we got online on how to pronounce her name because we thought Sacagawea, but it's actually been decided Sacagawea. But do you have any background on what that means?
I do.
Does it have a meaning?
Her name is made up of a compound of two very common words, which are bird and woman. So, bird woman.
That's nice.
She is from a part of the Shoshone tribe, and so she was originally from present-day Salmon, Idaho.
Yeah, lots of potatoes there.
And their tribe name meant salmon eaters.
Oh, salmon and potatoes, a classic.
You know what? But we don't serve salmon at Thanksgiving. Maybe we should fix that.
Huh.
A lot of shellfish, I think. I didn't grow up with shellfish, but I think a lot of people...
I didn't grow with shellfish either.
It's very New England, which is where the supposed first Thanksgiving occurred. But back to Sacagawea, what I love about the name Bird Woman was that a bird, when it lands on something, it's small. It's innocent, it's lightweight.
Scientifically, we get a lot of our flora and fauna from these tiny little birds who, pardon my French, take craps everywhere, and then you have a tree. So I get what you're saying.
Exactly. Small things can make such a huge impact.
Yeah.
And she was also the flora and fauna expert of the trip, so...
So from small things, great things emerge. And the fact that she's called Bird Woman, obviously swans are not native to that area, but that's what I think of. Someone just elegant and strong.
Oh, funny, because my bird for her is more like a goldfinch.
It's vibrant, so you always notice
Oh,
it.
really? I would have thought a sparrow, too. Something's, you know.
All right, we would love to hear what your impression of Sacagawea is. What bird would you...
What bird would she be? What bird would we be?
I'm a penguin.
A penguin? Why?
Oh, penguins are something that my dad and I had as like a special inside joke.
Aw.
And then my husband, it turned out when we first met, he and I connected about penguins, again with the same weird joke. And so penguins, they mate for life, they waddle. I waddle occasionally. It happens.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna call myself a Carolina redbird, but just because I really like redbirds, and around the holidays they're supposed to be bringers of good luck and holiday cheer, and they're also said to be like angels coming to visit, so every time I see a redbird, I'm always thinking of my mom.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Now back to Sacagawea.
So I think the best thing to do would be to talk about her first, and then we can kind of dissect and try to figure out what was her, what was history, what was imposed, what was self-given. So we have a lot of really limited information about her early life, unsurprisingly. She was born around 1788 in Lemhi County, Idaho. And in 1800, at about 12 years old, she and several other children were taken captive by the Hidatsa group. This raid resulted in the death of 4 Shoshone men, 4 Shoshone women, and several boys from her tribe. And then she was held captive in the Hidatsa village near present-day Washburn, North Dakota.
So I do have a question about that. Is she a captive, or was she, like, integrated within the tribe?
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, we always are talking about how adoption works different ways in different cultures.
Yes, and that is always super interesting, but no. In this case,
It was a hostage situation. She was taken in this raid. People were killed trying to keep the children from being taken in said raid. And then she was taken to this village that was relatively far away, considering, the mode of transportation at the time.
Oh.
And at 13, so just a year later, she was sold into a
Gross.
non-consensual marriage to this man named Charbonneau.
Yeah, that's not even Vlad the Impaler level, like, you're all right.
I'm sorry, when was Vlad the Impaler? All right.
When he was a kid, he grew up in relative security.
We're talking about the, I give you my kid, you take care of him, I don't revolt. Okay, yes, no, she was just taken and then married off.
Gross.
Charbonneau was a Quebec trapper, and he bought her and another young girl who was named Otter Woman as his wives.
I'm not here for the bigamy.
So we talk about, obviously, different cultures, different beliefs, and different values. But in this case, Charbonneau was a French Catholic, so that probably was against at least how he was brought up. And I think we can put a little bit of judgment in here that he bought 2 at once, like 2 for the price of 1. It's bad.
It's not so much the polyamory that's going on, it's that they had no agency or choice in the matter, and they were purchased. That's icky. It's icky.
It's very icky. There is a rumor that he won her through gambling, but that is, as I said, a rumor. I don't know if that's it. Nothing makes it better, but I don't know if that makes it worse.
Just gross all the way around.
So she's 13 years old. She's been forcibly taken from her home, from her culture. And while the Hidatsa and the Shoshone certainly lived in close contact with one another, it would still be a pretty far cry from comfortable. So then she's
sold into marriage, a marriage with a second woman. So, questions.
And then it was only a couple of years later that a chance encounter changed her entire life. But you know what? I shouldn't say that. It is very possible. And this is one of those really difficult things because we don't have her own thoughts, her own words. Did it change her life? Did this expedition of 2 years with a group of 30 plus men across the country and back?
30 plus men? Gosh, for whatever reason, I was like, oh, it's just Lewis Clark and Sacagawea.
No, it's Lewis Clark, Charbonneau, husband, because he's the one they actually technically hired. She didn't get paid. He did. And then he brought her along, and they refer to her in the diaries as his woman, which is very bothering. very bothering. And then they had a lot of other helpers. They had a lot of people that were guides for the different areas. They had their own servants. One of them brought his own black servant or slave.
And we don't get to hear their story. Imagine the insight of what he or she saw.
To go on this journey. Like, I mean, what if he didn't like camping?
I can imagine he had to do a lot of things he didn't like.
I think they all did in the end. So, did it change her life? Did it affect her in the way that it has affected American history? I don't know. But I can only imagine that being 16 and taking this adventure
with, I might add, a newborn strapped to her back
would have been, if not life-changing, certainly momentous.
Well, here's what I've got to say. I'd rather strap my potato of a child to my back than what I've got literally sitting in my lap right now that I'm like force-feeding Banana.
Fair enough, but this sweet little girl that's in your lap right now is not even a year, and when they got back, her son was almost 2. I'm going to tell you that children learning to walk whilst going across the country in canoes and other forms of transport would not be pleasant. Let's talk a little about the Louisiana Purchase, in case anyone doesn't know why Lewis and Clark went on this expedition. Today, the land that was purchased would include some parts of Arkansas, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Minnesota, Louisiana, New Mexico, Texas, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, Canada. So it was...
We owned part of Canada at one point?
We did. We got just a teeny little bit. Actually, we owned a lot of it in different places at different times. But
fascinating. I didn't know that.
This acquisition of territory, technically known as Louisiana, which I'm sure the state of Louisiana is sad to have diminished in size because right now it's huge.
So here's what I want to say just about Louisiana. It's my favorite fast fact. A Puccini opera, Manon Lescaut, is set in Louisiana, and basically they make Louisiana a desert, barren wasteland.
Instead of the swampy mess that it is.
Yeah, but it is an actual desert, and she dies in Louisiana, the desert, at the end, singing this really great aria.
Well,
if you think about it, Giacomo Puccini's dates were 1858 to 1924. So at this time, when he might have heard about Louisiana from the European point of view, the whole territory did include some deserts.
Oh my God.
Thinking out loud. Mind blown?
Yeah, it is.
I'm so excited. The acquisition occurred by the U.S. from the French First Republic in 1803. $15 million for 828,000 square miles in Middle America.
But how much is it per square? Because it sounds like a lot, but it's not, right? It's like 20 cents per square acre or something.
Interestingly, the man who went to do the actual negotiations, he was sent by President Thomas Jefferson, but it was another man that went. And he was told that he could authorize up to $10 million, not 15, but just for New Orleans. And the French were like, counteroffer. You can have all of this for $5 million. So he decided to do it unauthorized by the president, but he was like, yeah, this has got to be a good plan. But what he bought was not really French land. This gets back to our Thanksgiving Day historical tweaks. So in the end, he bought some places that were French-controlled, but most of it was territory and land that were lived in by Indigenous Americans. And what they bought, the U.S. bought the right to colonize there first. It was not like, oh, this is yours, here's your title, and everyone's going to respect this. It was, this is yours, and we're not going to come in and say, no, it was ours, and fight you for it. And we've kind of moved the Spanish and the English out of the way a bit. So it's yours now if you can take it from the indigenous peoples.
Seems like so kind. Such the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Well done, you.
So then what is this expedition? Well, this expedition was because Jefferson, instead of buying a city, bought 2/3 of the country as we know it today, which is crazy, excluding Alaska. He entrusted his friend, Captain Meriwether Lewis, to go on this expedition, and Meriwether Lewis recruited his friend, William Clark. They created the Corps of Discovery, and their official goals were to explore and map this newly acquired territory, find a practical route across the western half of the continent to the Pacific Ocean, which, fun fact, they did not actually buy the land all the way to the Pacific Ocean, if you even claim they bought anything of land. And so they just kept going past what they bought, just to note. And then he wanted them to establish an American presence in territory before other European powers could do so, with zero mention of what the Indigenous Americans owned or claimed or wanted or needed or their secondary objectives. They were supposed to study the plants, the animal life, the geography, and of course establish trade with the local tribes while stealing their land. So, that was the point of the expedition.
Hi, friend. Let's get to know one another. But now I'm going to take your land.
So if we're talking about a matter of agency for Sacagawea, for this woman that they recruited to go on the journey with them, did she know what she was doing? Did she understand the point of this expedition? Did she realize that helping them through this would enable America to take her people's land? Questions, right?
Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Did she understand what she was aiding? So, 1804, Corps of Discovery. They started out from Illinois, and then they wintered in the Mandan village that was near present-day North Dakota. While they were wintering in this village, they interviewed several trappers to act as guides and interpreters because language skills were going to be essential.
Yeah.
And these were two European men. Okay, they were American, but they had a European upbringing. They had been in military action, but our husbands are in the military, and I don't recall them learning how to hunt for their own food very frequently, nor how to...
my husband would be absolutely...
No, it would not go well. My dad doesn't like fish. He's just not a fish guy. We judge, but it's fine. And so he was in the Navy, and a lot of people, when they find out he's in the Navy and that he doesn't eat fish, say, well, but you were in the Navy. And he's like, we didn't put lines over the bow and start fishing for food.
I don't know. I've definitely seen on deployment where...
I've seen pictures of people having a nice time fishing. That's not how we supplied, even in explorer times. Columbus brought other food.
I don't know that Columbus is a great tie-in for this episode.
That's valid. Oh my God. They all brought other food, even the good ones.
Yeah.
Were there good ones?
I mean...
You know what? Never mind. That's too much of a question for today. They planned to have an expedition that would go up the Missouri River come spring, and one of the people that they interviewed was Charbonneau, and he claimed to speak several native languages, but more importantly, one of his wives, he said, spoke Shoshone, and the Shoshone tribe had access to horses, so they were going to canoe for quite a bit, and they were going to walk for quite a bit, and then they were going to get to mountains, and they needed horses, and the Shoshone had these horses. So she was essentially sold again by her husband as the interpreter to get him the job that he got paid for, and she did not.
Listen, I am just ready for Charbonneau to have a terrible end. I will cackle and dance on his grave.
He does not. Sacagawea at the time is pregnant. Yes, he offers up his pregnant wife for this unknown expedition, and she's about 16 years old. Clark says in his journals, quote, a French man named Charbonneau, who speaks the Big Belly language, which I'd love to know what that is, visits us. He wished to be hired and informed us his 2 squaws, or women, were Snake Indians. We engaged him to go on with us and take one of his wives to interpret the Snake language, referring to the Shoshone language. Now, what happened to the poor Otter woman, the other wife? No clue.
Hey, maybe she got out. If she's an otter, if that says anything about her personality, she's a little wily and she's got some spunk. So I'm hoping she got out.
He just said, oh, well, I purchased you, but you're not useful now, so bye.
Or that she just left. And
she did not, I think we can say she did not leave, but he left her, only took one. So.
But you know what? When they come back, she's not around. So in my mind, I am retconning this whole thing and saying she got out and had a fabulous life by herself.
Okay. We'll just let you have that fairy tale.
Yep.
Sacagawea and Charbonneau then moved into the expedition's fort, Fort Mandan, and that is when Clark actually gave her the nickname Janie. Don't know why, but eventually the two would become friends. In February of that year, before they'd left Fort Mandan, still in the same place, on February 11th, 1805, she gave birth to Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, who was nicknamed Pomp or Pompey by Clark. So Clark will come back over and over again. He loved Pomp, and he just felt like not a dad, but like a real close uncle.
Mm-hmm.
In April, so let's see, she had her baby in February. In April, we're leaving, and we're heading up the Missouri River. During this time, she has a 2-month-old strapped to her back, but at the same time, she is being incredibly helpful. She's helping them find food they can eat, medicinal herbs, teaching them how to trap. Although Charbonneau as a trapper would probably have been pretty helpful. Evidently, he was kind of like the cook. He took care of the food situation. So while he might be an ass, at least he could cook.
I mean, it goes a long way. Not Charbonneau a long way, but it goes a long way.
It goes a long way. And she was incredibly helpful. At one point, a canoe overturned, and all of their items are being carried away by the raging waters. And they're all trying to fix the capsized boat to turn it back over. And she's the one that notices all the journals, all the supplies, all the medicinal things they brought along, all their records just floating away. And so she alone saved all of these items. Both Lewis and Clark acknowledged that if she hadn't done that, they would have had to turn back right then and there. They would have had no purpose. It would have been a 2-month situation.
Well, good on her.
And they actually named that river after her. She also acted, as we said, as an interpreter. And at some point along the journey, and this is truly just miraculous, they happened upon a Shoshone tribe that happened to be led by her brother, Kamehameha.
Oh, that's really random, but okay.
Really random. They approached, and there's this beautiful montage that's in one of the journals where they're approaching, and all of a sudden she breaks into this Shoshone dance out of joy because she recognizes where she is. She's been there before. She knows this is where her people were. And Kamehameha recognizes her and says, "That's my sister."
Oh my God.
She obviously acts as the interpreter and arranges for them to have horses. Sadly, she finds out that her brother was actually planning on double-crossing them, and he was going to...
After that moving, fabulous thing.
It was that lovely emotional scene. And then he's like, yeah, so we're going to take the money, we're going to take the trade, and then we're just going to keep the horses, because we don't need to give them. But she finds out about this. I think she actually overhears him. And it is her that goes to him and says, I know what you're going to do. You know this is not the right thing. And he changes his mind, and he upholds his end of the bargain because of her.
Wow. That takes balls.
And again...
You know what? No, it takes a hoo-ha, because men with balls could never.
It takes a hoo-ha. Oh my God. Well, and again, did she know what was happening? She was part of the Corps of Discovery, but they have just happened upon her people. She has been stolen from these people. You could see... If I were her, I might have considered, that's fine, brother. You can double-cross him, and I'm just going to stay here. Feel free to kill my friends and my evil husband. But she didn't. Is that because of her son? Is that because of the life that she knew there? Did she actually like her husband? Did she feel like this Corps of Discovery served a good purpose? We'll never know. But it's interesting to think that she did have other options and chose not to take them.
That is true.
They reached the Pacific Ocean by November of 1805, and she was an enormous part of that.
I feel like that's pretty quick.
It was pretty quick. I mean, they started in North Dakota.
But still, they've got to go over the Rocky Mountains. That's no small deal.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
She also really helped them in ways that a lot of people don't think about. Indigenous American tribes could easily have perceived a group of 30-plus men carrying guns and rifles because you would need that to hunt down food.
Mm-hmm.
They could easily have perceived them as being a threat, dangerous, and shot them, or worse. It would have been reasonable to assume that could have happened. One of the things that they were supposed to do was create these relationships, but it was risky. However, because she was a woman, and in this case it kind of was just about the fact that she was there as a woman, the indigenous tribes did not feel threatened by the Lewis and Clark Corps of Discovery. And they credit her with that. History credits her with that, but it's something we don't often talk about, that just the fact that she was there, and of course carrying a baby on her back, really saved these men. They probably would not have been treated as well. They definitely would have had some kind of conflict, I think, had they not had this female peaceful presence.
Isn't that so interesting? Things that people perceive as weak or womanly is a saving grace. They literally hid behind the human shield of womanly and motherly feminine shield.
It's an interesting way to think about it, and it's an interesting aspect of her journey that I think says a lot about, frankly, why they took her along. You know, even though she did speak the Shoshone language, could they maybe have found a man? Yeah. As a historian, I think, why would they take a woman? That would be inconvenient, especially a pregnant woman and then one toting a toddler. But no, I think that her presence was actually perhaps quite calculated, and that everybody saw this would be a very peaceful way to introduce themselves. And it did turn out to be very helpful. They then wintered again in Oregon before returning. They did a few things that were really nice. They had a sort of democratic society within the Corps of Discovery, and every single member was given an equal vote, to include the black slave servant. They call him his manservant, but I think we can see beyond that, as well as Sacagawea. So I do like the fact that they had this equality that perhaps would not have existed outside of the Corps of Discovery.
Maybe not equality, but it is more egalitarian than normal.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. When they returned back to Fort Mandan, that was the point where Charbonneau and Sacagawea left. They returned to their village, and it's an interesting thing that Clark had become so close with Sacagawea, but really with Pomp, that he offered the following, quote, "You have been a long time with me and conducted yourself in such a manner as to gain my friendship. Your woman," Sacagawea, "who accompanied you that long, dangerous, and fatiguing route to the Pacific Ocean and back, deserved a greater reward for the attention and services on that route than we had in our power to give her at the Mandans. As to your little son, my boy Pomp, you well know my fondness of him and my anxiety to take him and raise him as my own child. If you are disposed to accept either of my offers to you and will bring down your son and your woman, Janie had best come along with you to take care of the boy until I get him. Wishing you and your family great success, and with anxious expectations of seeing my little dancing boy, Baptiste, I shall remain your friend, William Clark." And he sent this letter in August of 1806, after the expedition had returned. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
First of all, lovely that Clark was so taken with the little kid. He didn't have a family of his own. It's adorable. Second of all, weird that he's like, can I just have him?
Yeah, like,
could I raise him?
Why is he yours?
Why do you think you deserve this child? Thirdly, this isn't mentioned in here, but of the two offers, one was to take the child and to raise him. And the other one was actually a farm that he offered Charbonneau to come and take right outside of St. Louis, Missouri, which Charbonneau did do. So Charbonneau and Sacagawea and Pomp went to live in Missouri for a while as farmers. Charbonneau did not like it, so they left. And they went back to the trapping, more nomadic lifestyle. And at that point, they decide, and by they, I definitely mean Charbonneau, because we have no idea how Sacagawea felt about this, to give Clark Pomp. So he legally adopts Pomp, or Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, as his own son. And at the same time, he adopts a little girl named Lisette Charbonneau.
Oh.
Jean-Baptiste was then educated by Clark at the St. Louis Academy boarding school. Unfortunately, we don't know what happened to Lisette after this adoption. We don't know technically that she was Sacagawea's daughter. There is a possibility she could be his other wife's daughter, or
just some random person off the street. Maybe went to a lady of the night. Because Charbonneau really just strikes me as that kind of person.
Erica is anti-Charbonneau.
You can't tell.
The chauvinistic Charbonneau. We get it. We all agree. The daughter was likely born about 1812, but Clark never mentions her after this, so it's believed that she likely died quite young. We also don't know much about Sacagawea's death and her fate. She likely died around 1812, perhaps from an aftermath of childbirth, perhaps from an unknown sickness. There is a fur trader on the Missouri River who wrote that Sacagawea had, quote, become sickly and longed to revisit her native country. And there is also a Fort Lisa trading post on the Missouri River that notes, quote, "The wife of Charbonneau, a snake squaw, died of putrid fever, aged about 25 years. She left a fine infant girl."
25.
25. So she had made this first voyage after having just given birth and then hauling her newborn to 2-year-old with her across the continent and back. But seemingly something really felled her this second go-round. She also had a couple of really close calls on the journey itself. She got quite sick towards the end, and everyone thought she wasn't going to make it, and everyone was scared, not only for her, but also for little Pomp and who would take care of him, because I don't think we expected Charbonneau to be the kind of dad that changed diapers. And also because they really needed her expertise. They needed to know what to eat and what not. I mean, they're on the way back. They've learned a lot, but she was really helpful. She was a guide. She had been to most of these places before, either on her own or perhaps when she was taken. But on August 11th of 1813, William Clark officially became the guardian of the boy, about 10 years old, and Lisette Charbonneau, a girl of about 1 year old. There is this interesting rumor that rather than dying, she actually left Charbonneau, and I know you'll be down for this, that she was like, screw you, and she crossed the Great Plains and then married into the Comanche tribe, and then returned to Wyoming to the Shoshones around 1860 and died in 1884, which would have made her 96 years old. Probably not.
I mean,
yeah, probably not, but God, wouldn't that be so much better for her?
It would be nice to feel that she got to have her own decisions and that she could make her life what she wanted. But we obviously don't know. We don't know if she agreed to give her son over to William Clark. We do think that they were good friends, but that is from his point of view. We can't say for sure that she wasn't just rolling her eyes as she walked back every night like, God, why won't he stop talking?
Stop calling me Janie.
Stop calling me Janie.
Not Janie.
It's Sacagawea, bitch! So, little Pomp, Jean-Baptiste, was then raised about the age of 10 or so as William Clark's son. He ended up having pretty much lifelong celebrity status due to his unique first years.
I mean, yeah.
It's like when you get to this new group of people icebreaker, hey, give me a fun fact about yourself. I was that boy that went across the continent with my mom and these people because Thomas Jefferson told us to. He had a really interesting life. At 18, he befriended a German prince named Duke Paul Wilhelm of Württemberg, who then took him to Europe and let him live as royalty for the next 6 years. He learned 4 languages and was allegedly the father of a German love child named Anton Fries.
I love that.
Great. Sadly, he died. But he lived this lavish, courtly European lifestyle. In 1829, he returned from Europe and lived as a Western frontiersman. So he went from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Yeah.
In 1846, so almost 20 years later, he led a group of Mormons to California for the gold rush, then appointed magistrate for the mission San Luis Rey, but he was angered by the way they treated the indigenous peoples and left. Yay. And he was at some point a hotel clerk in Auburn, California, which was in the center of the gold rush. And then he himself went in search of riches in the gold mines of Montana at 61 years old, only to catch pneumonia on the trip and die in Oregon before actually making it all the way there.
He got legitimately Oregon trailed.
He was Oregon trailed on the Oregon Trail-ish. After having been the initial Oregon Trailer.
Oh, Pomp.
But it's interesting, he was half French-Canadian, and he was half Indigenous American.
And then had a random love child in Germany.
Yeah, well, and then he was raised by this American, but really European upbringing. In the end, he lived as a frontiersman, like his trapper father. He fought for Indigenous rights in whatever way he could in support of his mother. He led Mormons to the gold rush. He worked as a magistrate. He was a hotel clerk. And then he himself was caught up by the gold rush, not to mention the whole 6-year hiatus to Europe to become, besties with the Duke. It's an interesting life.
Yeah.
So that is kind of the end of the history. That's what we have. Those are the facts. But one of the things that I talked to Erica about as we were debating this episode was how she's portrayed, how her image is used. There are a number of people, places, institutions, and frankly, things that use Sacagawea as their allegory. She represents to them whatever it is they want her to. She is the face of the National American Women's Suffrage Association starting in the early 20th century. They adopted her as their symbol of women's worth and independence and erected statues and plaques.
Well, and probably was the first woman to cast a vote since it was that democratic.
Yeah, exactly. But in other ways, she was not an American citizen.
No.
She would not have been given the vote at this time even. And there's really no record of her having any interest in acting or supporting other women. So she was an independent woman. I think we can say that she could take care of herself, but we don't know if she was like, well, I really just want to hang with the guys, or if she was doing this for womankind. But the National American Women's Suffrage Association has decided she was. Hewlett-Packard processor is named after her.
What?
A Hewlett-Packard processor is named after her. It is a 4-bit microprocessor from the 1980s. But interestingly, it was for the first handheld computer. And so if you think about it, it's like a walking laptop. She was basically a walking Google for Lewis and Clark. Is this plant poisonous? Can we eat this? Should we go left or right? How do we handle these mountains?
Are they gonna kill us?
So I actually thought this was one of the better usages of her name that actually had some weight in her historical experience.
Yeah.
Night at the Museum, the movie, I've referenced it more than once, I hate to say, with Ben Stiller. She is perceived as this strong woman, and she falls in love with Teddy Roosevelt, which has so many problematic moments.
Oh, yeah, that's
So many problematic moments for this Indigenous American to be falling in love with Teddy Roosevelt, who... good president, bad president, whatever, definitely didn't do good things for the indigenous peoples of North America.
No.
She was inducted into the Hall of Great Westerners at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. Would she have believed herself a great Westerner? ? She was inducted into the National Cowgirl Museum and Hall of Fame. Was she a cowgirl? I don't think so. The USS Sacagawea is one of several U.S. warships to be named in her honor. Was she a warship? She was wayfaring. I see that she traveled, but a warship seems... because she was the emissary of peace.
Yeah, she was a bringer of peace.
Beacon of peace. Yep. Numerous national and state parks are named after her, which makes sense, especially if they were in lands that she would have lived in or was indigenous to. And there are a ton of sculptures of her that represent... someone, not her, because we don't know what she looked like. Speaking of likenesses,
she's most famously on the coin. I know you left that for last.
I did leave that for last because it is so problematic.
Yeah, I mean, you're trading her face as currency. Like, that's a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, she was sold into marriage and she was kidnapped, so it all makes sense. It was not modeled on her own unknown face, obviously, but it was taken from a modern Shoshone woman, so at least there was some attempt there. But this golden dollar coin has a lot of issues. With the imperialistic mindset, you can see the Sacagawea coin as being a distillation of the feminine and native identity to a commodity that the United States government now controls, handles, collects, and assigns value to.
Ugh. That
I know.
Is so icky.
It's so icky. I remember when the coin was coming out, and I was kind of excited about it. I was thrilled that there was a woman on a coin. So again, I myself distilled her down to just being a woman. And I was thrilled that it was finally someone of indigenous culture, because I thought, great, we're finally representing a huge part of our nation and our culture. But once you think about the fact that she's on this money as a commodity without her approval of being used by the American states as a representative. You know, Benjamin Franklin's on our money. Okay, but Benjamin Franklin was a founder of the United States of America. We know how he felt about being an American. We know what he fought for. We know what he believed. We know what he stood for. We don't have any of that for her. She clearly helped Lewis and Clark and their expedition make it to the end.
Clear answer is if she knew what she was helping to do.
Or even if Charbonneau knew. We really don't know what.
Don't even bring Charbonneau into this.
Okay, we'll leave chauvinistic Charbonneau at death's door.
A miserable, terrible death.
She's worth $1.
Should be at least 5.
So just as she had been exchanged and traded before, she's being exchanged and traded forever. for as long as the United States manages to keep on to that currency.
Well, and even then, she's going to be passed around or sold or bartered as a higher commodity because it's
worth, it's
Yeah.
valuable in its antiquity. Exactly.
Yeah, in perpetuity.
So a paper that I read said, by commemorating Sacagawea's involvement in Lewis and Clark Trail, the U.S. Mint continues oppression because she is not honored for who she was or for her innate personal or cultural qualities. Instead, she is venerated for what she produced for America. She helped them. She acquired horses for them. She provided knowledge to them. She taught explorers. She rescued Clark's journals. But we don't know what she felt about any of these things.
It just goes to show that her identity has been just co-opted.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about in the museum world about repatriating items back to their home country. But there's something to be said about people who don't have a voice. How do you repatriate their identity back to them? Which is an interesting thought.
It is. It's an interesting thought. I hope, the goal is that something like this podcast starts that process. We are not able to give her the voice. As I said last week, it's history. It's too late. But we can at least ask people to think about it in a new light, that we can challenge the co-opted image they have and try to give facts only and leave questions as to intent.
And even just having questions being something that is worthy of discussion and worthy to mull over, which I think is, you use those critical thinking skills and you come to these conclusions, in a very didactic way or a Socratic method where you bounce back and forth off of each other. And I think that is a really good way to come to your own conclusion about what she thought or how she felt or what does that mean or how do you go forward in honoring her legacy if you choose to do that.
Yes, and as two women that are producing a history podcast,
Or should I say 3, as we have Erica's daughter joining us today.
hi! I think it's important that we bring these things into consideration. The other thing that we can take away from this is that this is a season, as we talked about at the beginning, of Thanksgiving. We grew up with the top hat wearing pilgrims who lovingly and kindly went to the Native American tribes and said, "Oh, we're just not doing well." And the tribe said, "Oh, goodness, let us help you, please." And then they had this fabulous meal full of all of these foods like
Mac and cheese.
stuffing, cranberry sauce, gravy, all these things that I don't think they actually had at the dinner. And they came together in peace. It's a wonderful allegory.
It's not even an allegory. It's a wonderful fantasy. It's a wonderful fantasy.
But it's not reality. The reality is quite different. We don't address the fact that these native peoples were having their land taken from them and yet still helped with farming techniques. And I think you can see that with Sacagawea assisting them on this expedition while not knowing that the land of her people would eventually be stolen from them.
Well, and let's be just honest about something. The pilgrims didn't even wear all black.
I made those hats every year in elementary school. What the heck?
When I found that out in our Salem witch trial episode, I was very upset.
It was very detrimental to my image that I had co-opted for myself of the Thanksgiving dinner. We wanted to bring this episode today in part because we thought it would be lovely if our listeners could share the children's aspect with their kids to bring the truth about the Indigenous peoples without making it a Debbie Downer episode.
Instead,
The episode itself is about feminine strength. It's about resilience
And friendship.
and friendship. And so however you celebrate with your family, whether or not you have salmon or shellfish, or you go standard
Or potatoes.
turducken,
Ooh.
whatever it is that your family does, we hope that when you come around the dinner table and when you find people of different political or spiritual beliefs sitting across from you, that you are able to find this moment of perhaps we don't always get along, perhaps we have different goals in life, but we are able to help each other when we can and we can put things aside. And I think that Sacagawea does that nicely.
so until next time, I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica, and we are Pithily Yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!